Chemical bonds. How do the elements combine to form compounds? Well, what sticks them together are the chemical bonds. And these chemical bonds result from attractions between the charged particles that are part of the atom. Remember, the atom is composed of positive protons, and negative electrons. And when we get an attraction between these particles, we get a chemical bond, and it holds the atoms together. Two basic kinds of chemical bonds, ionic and covalent. So ionic bonds involve ions, hence the name ionic bond. So this happens when we've got metals and nonmetals. What happens is the nonmetals take electrons from the metals, or maybe you could think of the metals giving electrons to the nonmetals, but there's a transfer. So what's important in ionic bonds is the transfer of electrons. The metal atom becomes a cation. The nonmetal atom becomes an anion. Now you have a positive and a negative charge, and they're attracted to each other. And the result is an ionic bond. So in compounds of metals and nonmetals, ionic compounds, the solid phase is generally composed of a lattice, a regular three-dimensional array of alternating cations and anions. And so they're going to arrange themselves to maximize the attraction and minimize the repulsion. So here's a picture of sodium metal, which sodium is soft enough you can cut it with a table knife. It's very, very fun. It's also extremely explosive if you mix it with water. But the atoms in sodium would arrange themselves in a nice crystalline structure. And here's chlorine. Chlorine is a gas at room temperature. It's not good to breathe. It's poisonous. And it forms diatomic molecules. And what happens is you get this chlorine atom and a sodium atom together, and the sodium atom gives one of its electrons to the chlorine, so the chlorine becomes an anion, the sodium becomes a cation, and now they're very attracted to each other because opposites attract. And so they'll form this lattice where we've got plus minus repeating all the way in 3 dimensions. And that's called table salt, or sodium chloride. Yes? Are my husband and I opposites? Is that why we're attracted? Well, I suppose there is something to that. I think most people that have a romantic interest in each other, you see something in the other person that's lacking in yourself. Of course, you can't be complete opposites, right? You have to have things in common as well. Because we have chemistry in common. It's good chemistry. Covalent bonds are the other kind. What does the prefix co mean? Or what does it imply? Together? Sharing? My son Andrew is 5, and he's still into the whole co-sleeping thing. So he falls asleep in our bed, and I move him to his place, and then later during the night he wakes up and he comes right back. Co-sleeping, you're sleeping in the same bed. Covalent means we're sharing valence electrons. So covalent, this is sharing. Ionic, transfer of electrons. Covalent, sharing electrons. This happens between nonmetals. If you got 2 nonmetals together, they both want to gain electrons to form anions. So they can't make each other happy because one isn't willing to give up an electron to the other one. And so what they do instead is they share. And the process of sharing brings them together. So the covalently bound atoms compose a molecule, and we call these compounds molecular compounds. So ionic bonds lead to ionic compounds, which contain ions. Covalent bonds lead to molecules. Molecules are what compose molecular compounds.